Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Maggie Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Budget 2013 is Bill English's fifth, and it is indeed building momentum. It confirms that New Zealand is back on track with more economic growth, more jobs, rising wages and a return to surplus by 2014-15. That is all great news for New Zealand and very bad news for the opposition, who are bereft, as we've heard this afternoon, of any fresh ideas or policies. Both Labour and the Greens are, of course, and have proven it time and again, anti-growth parties. They are opposed to any and all initiatives that would create jobs and boost the economy. The opposition's borrow more, spend more policies would take our economy backwards at a great rate. And when no one will lend us any more money, what's their solution? Print more, of course. That's the sort of madness that the unholy alliance of no ideas would deliver. The tired old, tried and failed Labour policies and the watermelon Greens, those green on the outside and socialist red at heart individuals that think they're doing so well. This budget, 2013, is a defining document from a government that is spending prudently, not spending up large, which is all the opposition can come up with. So I'm not going to waste any more time this afternoon on them. Instead, I intend to focus on the very positive measures that were introduced into the budget in the vitally important areas of health, housing and welfare. As our very competent and successful Health Minister Tony Ryall outlined at the start of today's budget debate, this John Key-led government is investing more in health than ever before. He outlined the number of green prescriptions, the strong focus on investing in preventative care. To recap, we are making a $1 billion investment available over 4 years. That's boosted the total health spending to a record level of $14.7 billion. Now let's look specifically at where that's being targeted. As our population is healthier and we're living longer, it is projected, as the Minister indicated, that by 2045, 2050, there are going to be 150,000 New Zealanders with dementia. Now, as I and many New Zealand families know only too well, the painful reality of living with dementia is a terrible struggle for the sufferer and for their families, who have to watch as the people we love gradually decline and need more and more high-level support. My late mother's 10-year decline with multi-infarct dementia was not untypical. And it was very sad to see a once independent, successful businesswoman and vibrant personality struggling to do the simple things like making tea and toast and desperately wanting to stay independent and in her own home for as long as possible. So to help people in these difficult situations, we're investing an extra $70 million in aged care and dementia services. And that money is being very carefully targeted into the areas where it will help most. As my mother Agnes lost her ability to recognise people and places, it became even more important to her to stay in her own home because it was a safe place. It was a place where she was familiar with all her surroundings and her garden. She was a happier and calmer person there. But as it eventually took its toll on her, Mum needed more and more support to stay at home, and while I was able to pay privately for much of the assistance that she needed, it is a very difficult thing to manage long term. I know that the $20 million, which has been allocated in this year's budget, targeted specifically to be invested in home support services, will be invaluable. Some things are priceless. It'll provide practical help so that people can stay in the familiar environments of their own homes for as long as possible. So, with an ageing population, we need to ensure the best possible quality of life for dementia sufferers and for their families. It's very clear to me that it is important to detect it for as early as possible. I know of many families who are in denial for a long time and just not aware of the onset of dementia and the early signs. So they experienced, I'm afraid to say, heartbreaking misunderstandings and family rifts, actually, until they understood what was happening. Overall, as a society, we need to have a much better and earlier awareness of dementia and its inevitable pathway. So when the time does come for more expert intervention and residential care options, we need a workforce that is equipped with the right level of training. There's no question in my mind that caregivers need to be compassionate, and they need that quality in abundance. I believe it's basically a vocational guidance. It's a calling, really, to look after people who are losing their minds to dementia. And there's also a need to have better training and for more specifically skilled people to meet that growing demand. So to meet that, we have allowed $3.2 million towards training for health professionals, towards awareness programs and also for early detection assistance for the clinical teams, because these kinds of conditions require that high level of skill as well as that high level of compassion. And believe me, I think, and for people who've experienced it, that's money well spent. It'll make a huge difference to the quality of life for the person suffering from dementia and for their families. With the best will in the world, it's very difficult once the condition has reached a certain stage for most New Zealand families to look after dementia sufferers at home. And that's why the $12 million increase in funding for bed subsidies and the vital encouragement for further investment in dementia beds is essential. So over the next 4 years, we are also funding through the DHBs an additional $33.2 million on aged residential care subsidies. In the vital area of housing, the Minister, Dr Nick Smith, is as determined through his portfolio as Health Minister Tony Ryall is with health to help the vulnerable in our society. We know that crowded, cold and damp conditions contribute to dismal health outcomes. So by making homes warmer, drier and healthier, it's one of his priorities. It's the right thing to do. And unlike the waffle and the weasel words of the opposition, Dr Smith is not leaving that to chance. An extra $100 million investment in the highly successful home insulation program is going to boost the number of homes insulated to 230,000 by September this year. This is a clear and measurable thing. So all state houses capable of being insulated will be. To measure the standard of our state housing stock, he's developing and trialling a housing warrant of fitness to apply to all 69,000 Housing New Zealand properties, so that over the next 3 years, this government is making a record investment of $2.9 billion in state housing. And it's also making very bold changes to the way that we deliver housing assistance and targeting it to the people who really need it. The shift from state-dominated to community housing has been very successful in Europe, in North America and in Australia. So in Budget 2013, our government has announced that we are also going to extend income-related rent subsidies to community housing providers. So churches, charities and other NGOs often integrate housing with other wraparound services to people with disabilities, to people with mental health issues and to people with drug and alcohol problems. These sort of wraparound services can often do, let's face it, a better job of meeting their clients' complex needs. This government is determined to create the right environment to grow the community housing sector. Quality, affordable housing is good for the economy and it's also very good for communities. High housing costs ultimately raise debt and increase demand for social assistance. Under this government, the Kiwi dream of owning your own home will again become a reality and within reach of low and middle income New Zealanders. We've announced a raft of measures to make housing more affordable. We're looking at increasing land supply. We're streamlining consent and compliance costs, better delivery of core infrastructure to support that new housing, and we're also getting on top of the costs around building materials and construction. We're not just sitting back and leaving it to chance, we're doing something about it, and we have concrete, measurable things. As my colleague Jonathan Young said in his earlier call, we are not just aiding people, we are enabling people. And that's why I come to our welfare reforms. They're increasing, and under Budget 2013, low-income families will be receiving greater support in this budget. Really, it's a combination of what we've been doing, extending proven programs and also introducing new initiatives, targeting resources and targeting support. This is complemented by the government's $139.3 million investment through the Social Housing Fund that others have detailed. Helping people to help themselves is what is at the heart of this government's budget, and it is a government and it is a budget with real heart and measurable outcomes that will really help people because it's targeted, it's precise, it's measurable and it's going to work. This government has put another $1.5 million to support budgeting services as well, so that people who haven't really ever been taught how to grasp the reality of budgeting and making sure their chequebook works, making sure that they're not overspending, lessons that perhaps the Labor colleagues across the way could well benefit from. I guess to end, my North Shore electorate have given me very positive feedback on this Budget 2013 and all its measures. ACC was one of the things that they had been looking for. They wanted to have some better provisions there, and what we're doing with the reduction there with the levies has been outstanding. They have told me that they love the significant levy reductions of around $300 million, which will extend to $1 billion the following year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr. Speaker, I listened very carefully to the budget speech from the Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery.